Come on, just a little bit more. Just one more bite for me.
The November rain drummed against the windows of Bella Vista, the small neighborhood restaurant that chef Marco Romano had poured his heart into for the past 3 years. At 36, Marco had traded his dream of opening a high-end establishment in the city for something more precious, a life that allowed him to be present for his 4-year-old daughter, Isabella. The restaurant was nearly empty this Tuesday evening, just the way Marco preferred it on weeknights. It gave him time to experiment with new recipes while Isabella colored at the corner table, her curly blonde hair catching the warm light from the Edison bulbs he had installed himself. "Papa, I'm hungry," Isabella announced, looking up from her drawing of what appeared to be a very purple elephant. "What would my little chef like tonight?" Marco asked, wiping his hands on his apron as he approached her table. "Can you make the soup that tastes like hugs?" she requested, referring to the butternut squash soup he had created specifically for her, seasoned with just a hint of cinnamon and vanilla. "Of course. Piccola?" Marco smiled, kissing the top of her head. "But first, let Papa finish prep for tomorrow." As Marco returned to his kitchen, the restaurant's front door chimed. He looked up to see a woman in an expensive navy suit entering with a baby carrier. Even from across the restaurant, he could hear the infant crying, and he noticed the woman's obvious distress as she struggled with an umbrella, her briefcase, and the carrier. The woman appeared to be in her late 30s, with blonde hair pulled back in a precise bun that was now slightly disheveled from the rain. Her suit was clearly designer, but her face showed the exhaustion of someone who had been pushed beyond their limits. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice strained. "Are you still open?" Marco glanced at the clock. It was past closing time, but something about the desperation in her voice made him nod. "Of course. Please have a seat wherever you'd like." The woman, whose name was Catherine Blackwell, chose a table near the kitchen and carefully set down the baby carrier. The infant inside was perhaps 6 months old, with dark hair and the kind of powerful cry that suggested serious displeasure with the world. Catherine had built Blackwell Enterprises from a small consulting firm into a billion-dollar corporation over the past 15 years. She was known in business circles as someone who could solve any problem, negotiate any deal, and handle any crisis with unflappable composure. But tonight, as she sat in this small restaurant with her crying daughter, she felt utterly defeated. "I'm sorry," Catherine said to Marco as he approached with a menu. "She's been crying for 3 hours. I've tried everything. I know she's hungry, but she won't take the bottle, and the nanny quit this morning with no notice." Marco looked at the baby, whose cries were indeed becoming more distressed. His paternal instincts, honed by years of caring for Isabella, immediately kicked in. "May I?" he asked gently, gesturing toward the carrier. Catherine hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She was desperate enough to accept help from anyone at this point. Marco carefully lifted the baby from her carrier, and something remarkable happened. His voice, when he spoke to her, took on the same gentle tone he used with Isabella. "Hello there, beautiful girl," he said softly in Italian. "Che cosa c'è?" "What's troubling you?" The baby's cries diminished slightly, as if she was curious about this new voice and the warmth she felt in these experienced arms. "She's hungry," Catherine said helplessly. "But every time I try to give her the bottle, she pushes it away." Marco studied the baby for a moment, then looked at the bottle Catherine held out. "May I see this?" He examined the formula carefully, then gently touched a drop to his lips. His expression immediately changed. "Signora, this formula is much too cold. Babies Isabella's age, they need their milk to be body temperature, like Mama's milk would be." "Body temperature?" Catherine looked confused. "The nanny always made it this way." "Every baby is different," Marco said kindly. "Isabella, my daughter, she was the same way. Very particular about temperature, very particular about everything." He handed the baby back to Catherine. "If you don't mind, let me warm this properly." Catherine watched in amazement as Marco took the bottle to his kitchen and began what appeared to be a very precise process. He didn't simply microwave it or run it under hot water. Instead, he filled a small saucepan with water, brought it to a specific temperature, and then gently warmed the bottle while testing it repeatedly. "The secret," he called out from the kitchen, "is that it must be exactly 37 degrees Celsius. Not warmer, not cooler. I learned this from my nonna when Isabella was born." While he worked, Isabella looked up from her coloring and approached Catherine's table with the innocent curiosity of a 4-year-old. "Your baby is very pretty," Isabella said seriously. "Is she sad?" "She's hungry," Catherine replied, finding herself talking to the little girl as if she were an adult. "But she won't eat." "Papa makes the best food in the whole world," Isabella said with conviction. "He can fix anything." When Marco returned with the bottle, the transformation was immediate. The baby accepted it eagerly, her cries stopping as she began to drink with obvious relief. Catherine stared at him in amazement. "How did you know?" "When you become a single parent," Marco said gently, "you learn to notice everything. Every cry means something different. Every behavior has a reason." "Single parent," Catherine repeated quietly. "Isabella's mother?" "She left when Isabella was 6 months old," Marco replied without bitterness. "She said motherhood wasn't what she had expected. It was difficult for a while, but Isabella and we figured it out together." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know what I'm doing. I've run a billion-dollar company for 15 years, but I can't figure out how to feed my own daughter." Marco pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "What's your daughter's name?" "Sophia," Catherine said softly, looking down at the baby who was now drinking contentedly. "Sophia." "Beautiful name. Wisdom." Marco smiled. "And how old is Sophia?" 6 months. "I've been trying to balance everything, work and motherhood, but I'm failing at both. The nanny I hired came highly recommended, but Sophia cried constantly when she was here. I thought maybe she was just a difficult baby." "No baby is difficult," Marco said gently. "They just have needs that haven't been understood." Yet, Isabella had returned to her coloring but was listening to the conversation with the attentiveness that children show when adults are discussing something. "Important. Papa," Isabella said, looking up from her elephant. "Remember when I used to cry all the time?" "You were never difficult, Piccola," Marco said with a smile. "You just needed things to be done in a specific way." "What kind of specific way?" Catherine asked, genuinely curious. Marco thought for a moment. Isabella needed her bottles warmed exactly right, but she also needed to be held a certain way while eating. And she needed quiet, no television or loud noises. And most importantly, she needed to feel safe. Safe? Babies, they sense everything. Stress, anxiety, fear. If the person feeding them is nervous or impatient, they become nervous too. Marco looked at Catherine with understanding eyes. "When was the last time you ate something?" Catherine tried to remember. "This morning, I think. Maybe yesterday." "And when did you last sleep more than 2 hours at a time?" "I don't remember." Marco stood up and walked back to his kitchen. "Isabella, would you like to help Papa make something special for our new friend?" Isabella jumped up eagerly, and Catherine watched as father and daughter worked together in the kitchen with practiced coordination. Isabella stood on a small step stool, carefully measuring ingredients under her father's guidance, while Marco prepared what appeared to be a simple but aromatic soup. "The secret to good food," Marco called out as he worked, "is not complicated recipes or expensive ingredients. It's understanding what someone needs and making it with love." 20 minutes later, Marco returned to Catherine's table with a bowl of the most fragrant soup she had ever smelled. It was a simple butternut squash soup, but the aroma carried hints of herbs and spices that seemed to promise comfort and warmth. "This is Isabella's favorite," Marco said, setting the bowl down. "I created it when she was teething and wouldn't eat anything else." Catherine took a tentative sip and immediately felt tears spring to her eyes. It wasn't just that the soup was delicious, though it was. It was that she could taste the care that had gone into it, the love and attention that had created something specifically designed to comfort and nourish. "This is incredible," she whispered. "The recipe is simple," Marco said, sitting back down. "But the important ingredient is intention. When you cook for someone you love, the food carries that love." Catherine looked down at Sophia, who had finished her bottle and was now sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I don't think I know how to do that." "Do what?" Love her the way she needs to be loved. I can run board meetings and negotiate million-dollar contracts, but I can't comfort my own baby when she cries. Marco was quiet for a moment, watching Catherine hold her daughter with the careful uncertainty of someone afraid of making a mistake. Signora, may I ask you something personal? Catherine nodded. Why did you have Sophia? The question caught Catherine off guard. What do you mean? I mean, what made you decide to become a mother? Catherine was quiet for a long time, considering the question. Finally, she spoke. I'm 38 years old. I've achieved every professional goal I set for myself. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But I realized that I had never created anything that would last beyond business cycles and market fluctuations. She looked down at Sophia's sleeping face. I wanted to create something real, something that mattered in a way that stock prices and quarterly reports never could. And you have, Marco said softly. But creating a business and creating a family, they require different skills. What do you mean? In business, you solve problems by taking control, by making decisions quickly and moving forward. But with babies, with children, sometimes the solution is to slow down, to pay attention, to let them teach you what they need. Catherine felt more tears beginning to fall. I don't know how to slow down. I don't know how to not be in control. Isabella approached the table again, this time carrying her coloring book. Would you like to see my elephant? She asked Catherine. Catherine looked at the drawing, which was indeed a very purple elephant with what appeared to be wings. It's beautiful, Isabella. What's special about your elephant? She can fly, Isabella explained seriously, and she takes care of baby elephants who don't have mamas. The innocence of the comment hit Catherine like a physical blow. Here was this 4-year-old who had grown up without a mother, talking about elephants who take care of babies who don't have mamas. Isabella, Catherine said gently, do you miss having a mama? Isabella considered this question with the seriousness that children bring to important topics. Sometimes, but Papa takes very good care of me. And he says that love comes in different shapes, like puzzle pieces. Puzzle pieces? Some families have mama puzzle pieces and papa puzzle pieces. Some families have just papa pieces or just mama pieces. Some families have grandma pieces or auntie pieces. But if the pieces fit together and make love, then it's a good family. Catherine looked at Marco with new understanding. You taught her that. She taught me that, Marco replied. Children understand love in ways that adults sometimes forget. Over the next hour, as Catherine finished her soup and Sophia continued to sleep peacefully, Marco shared stories about the early days of single parenthood, the sleepless nights, the constant worry, the gradual learning process of understanding what Isabella needed. The turning point, Marco said, came when I stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be present. Isabella didn't need me to have all the answers. She needed me to pay attention to her specific needs and respond with patience and love. How do I learn to do that? Catherine asked. Marco smiled. The same way you learn to run a billion-dollar company. One decision at a time, one day at a time. But instead of quarterly reports, you measure success in smiles and peaceful sleep and moments of connection. When it came time for Catherine to leave, she found herself reluctant to return to her empty penthouse apartment and the challenges that awaited her there. Marco, she said as she gathered Sophia and her things, would you be willing to teach me? Not just about feeding her, but about all of it. About being the kind of mother she deserves. Marco looked surprised. Signora, I'm just a restaurant owner. You could hire the best nannies, the most qualified experts. I could, Catherine agreed. But experts can teach technique. What I need to learn is something different. I need to learn how to put love into the daily act of caring for someone. 6 months later, Catherine Blackwell sat in the kitchen of her renovated penthouse, carefully warming a bottle to exactly the right temperature, while Sophia played contentedly in her high chair. The kitchen, once a showcase of unused stainless steel appliances, had been transformed into a warm, functional space where Catherine had learned to prepare simple, nourishing meals. Marco had become not just a friend, but a mentor in the art of loving parenthood. Every week, Catherine would bring Sophia to Bella Vista, where Isabella would play with the baby, while Marco taught Catherine new recipes and new approaches to balancing work and family. Catherine had restructured her entire company, delegating more responsibilities and creating systems that allowed her to work from home 3 days a week. The business continued to thrive, but now it served her life instead of consuming it. And Sophia, who had once cried inconsolably in the arms of expensive nannies, now gurgled happily as her mother sang Italian lullabies that Marco had taught them both. The recipe Marco had shared that first night wasn't just for butternut squash soup. It was a recipe for creating love through attention, patience, and the willingness to put someone else's needs before your own convenience. Isabella had been right about puzzle pieces. Catherine's family didn't look like the traditional picture she had once imagined, but the pieces fit together perfectly. A successful mother learning to slow down, a wise chef who understood that nourishment comes in many forms, and 2 little girls who were teaching the adults in their lives that love is both simpler and more complex than any business plan could ever capture. The soup recipe, written in Marco's careful handwriting, hung framed in Catherine's kitchen. But the real recipe, the one for creating a life filled with love and presence and attention to what truly matters, was written in the daily choices she made to put relationship before achievement and connection before control. Sometimes the most important lessons come not from experts or books, but from people who have learned through experience that love is both an art and a practice, requiring patience, attention, and the willingness to measure success not in profits, but in the peaceful sleep of a well-loved child. If this story reminded you that the most valuable skills in life often can't be learned in boardrooms or classrooms, but through the patient practice of caring for others, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need this message. Subscribe for more stories about unexpected teachers and the beautiful ways that parenthood can transform our understanding of success. And please comment below about a time when someone taught you something important about love or family through their actions rather than their words. Your story might be exactly what another parent needs to hear today.